Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to the Ghost Queen's House of Horrors. Today we have a couple scary stories for you to fall asleep to. First up is written by Loser Strawberry. I've had many experiences, but I'll tell you one that freaked me out because I wasn't the only witness. I was about 12 years old, and I was talking with my dad in his room. My mom was in the closet with the lights off, but we could clearly see her folding clothes. Well, during me and my dad's conversation, he had asked my mom something, but got no reply. He eventually got to the point where he started to yell. I got up and stepped into the closet, but then I heard my mom walk into the room and ask why he was yelling her name. I looked at her and she had a towel wrapped around her. I quickly looked back into the closet and saw nothing. Absolutely nothing. This obviously creeped me and my dad out. Whatever we saw, it wasn't my mom. Whatever it was had her shape, and even the bun. My mom always had her hair in a bun. I would have completely thought it was my imagination if my dad wasn't also there and if he didn't also see it. So that story was pretty short and sweet. They are based off real experiences. Our second story is by Black Cat 1202, the Old Waterhouse. Over the heath, there is an ancient crumbling waterhouse where the entire estate's water system was managed. Believe me, we thought it was a miracle how anything that old and manky could keep and pump out any water, but it did. It was made with bricks, with a black slate roof and iron doors. Although, by the time of this incident, it was just a shadow of its former self, and didn't have any doors. The windows were all smashed in by generations of kids throwing rocks and stones. It was there where my mama and her siblings were kids playing over the heath, and they all told us about it, spooked them and their mates as it did us. It was a really hot day one summer in the school holidays. The older boys were at a home for some reason, and all the younger cousins, me included, were being little brats, so the boys said they would take us all blackberry picking to keep us quiet. Mama agreed gratefully. The boys were really responsible and mature at 16, 17, 18. They babysat for us younger kids all the time, so we knew the rules of staying close to the boys and doing what they told us, and so a half hour later, everyone had their fruit baskets and we were off. There were actually 5 of us younger kids. We were all really excited, as blackberry picking was a great family favorite activity, and our Grand's blackberry pies were the best. Grand's house led directly to the back of the heath. There was a fence with a gap at the end. One of my older cousins passed me through to the other, then lifted my tiny wheelchair over the fence. The other kids went through in seconds, and away we were. On our way to our destination, the older boys told us spooky stories, as they always did. Half because they liked scaring us, and half because we used to beg them to. There was nothing more terrifying than a story from my cousins. They were masters and so believable, we loved it. We all stopped talking when we came to the Waterhouse. Nobody ever dared to speak around or near the Waterhouse, not even the older boys. For something so mundane, it always looked, and still does, so eerie. There was a second fence to go through before we reached our beloved blackberry field, but this time, as we squeezed through the gap of the fence, we were all more somber as we remembered the old wife's tale of that Waterhouse. And so the story goes. Once in the early 1960s, there was a gang of bank robbers. They were local to the area and were really nasty pieces of work. Their expertise was terrorizing bank customers and staff alike before grabbing and shooting anything that moved. They did several jobs without getting caught, but they really messed up one particular job. A sweet 19-year-old trainee bank clerk was shot dead, and 5 more were seriously injured. One of the gang was also shot dead, along with the nastiest member of the gang being seriously wounded in the crossfire. It is said that the remaining gang members escaped with just a few hundred and made their way over to the heath and hid out in the Waterhouse. It was still new at the time and a perfect hideaway for the murderers. There was a lot of contention and stress between the remaining gang. Months, although it was never proven how. The bodies of all 3 of the remaining gang members were discovered rotting away in the Waterhouse 6 months later. A few years after the weird stuff and creepy noises started occurring all around the Waterhouse, mysterious, quote, hairy figures were glimpsed moving stealthily amongst the pipes and wires. A dank, moldy, rotten smell like aging river weeds was always smelt around the area of the Waterhouse, and eerie wails and menacing murmurs could be heard day and night. In the late 70s, there was a spate of mysterious deaths of homeless people who would shelter over at the heath not too far from the Waterhouse. There was nothing to ever link the deaths to the Waterhouse, but the locals started giving the Waterhouse and surrounding area a wide berth because of the creepy history and dark reputation, and that left the Waterhouse abandoned and in disrepair. That's all we knew of the Waterhouse's dark history. That is why we were so wary and anxious to get away from it as quickly as possible. When we were all through the gap in the fence further from the Waterhouse, us younger cousins built up enough courage to glance over at the building of ill repute before being rounded up by the older boys. Cousin A put me in my wheelchair again, and we set off to the blackberry field. We soon arrived at the field where some other local kids we knew were already there, and spent a nice afternoon picking and eating the juicy sweet blackberries, and splashing in the river, and soon the sun was getting low and it was time for home. Our journey home was much like the one there. We were still bantering, laughing. The older boys were still winding us up, slightly, but being as it was getting later, we were feeling wearier and lightly subdued. When we reached the fence before the Waterhouse, the air felt slightly too close, like before a thunderstorm. The youngest of the 3 older boys got me out of my wheelchair so that Cousin B could lift it over the fence. The other kids were already on the other side of the fence with H and B. Cousin A suddenly said to his brother, in a low, guarded voice. "Something moved at the back of there, bruv." Cousin B just looked at him sideways. Out of all the boys, Cousin A was the most likely to pull a stunt or wind someone up for a laugh, but Cousin A was straight-faced. Cousin A said, "I'm going to have a look," passing me through to B and squeezing past us all. "Wait up, Cousin A. We've got..." He paused, having to put me in my wheelchair. Cousin B moved forward towards his brother. When we all heard Cousin A shriek out in horror and disgust, and the two boys moved quickly. Cousin H, having already taken me on my wheelchair again, told everyone to run, and we did. Cousin B picking up my tiny wheelchair, folding it up while we ran. Cousin A grabbed the other two kids' hands and followed B and H, running with me on his shoulders, holding my other cousin's hands. We ran and ran. Cousin A kept saying, "Don't look back, don't look back." I did, but I didn't see anything. We didn't stop till we got to the fence which led to the road to the estate. We could actually see civilization again. We were all exhausted, especially the older boys. And before we slipped through the fence to the road, Cousin B, holding himself up by the railings, asked, "What did you see, eh?" Yellow eyes and a hairy face." All of us younger kids began to panic and scream. Cousin H had to calm us all down. He said that we were safe, that it would be alright. But all we wanted was to get as far away from the Waterhouse as possible. When we got home, we all looked bedraggled and nervy. Mama and my aunt noticed us and asked what was wrong. Cousin H just said we got spooked by a drunk old man in the bushes looking for golf balls to sell, and that was common to see, so my aunt and Mama gave us a pep talk and hugged us. We never did tell my Mama or my auntie the truth about the yellow eyes and hairy face, nor did we actually find out what it was, but us kids didn't go near that Waterhouse for a long time after this. Alright, well, thank you, viewers. I hope you all have some lovely nightmares, and good night.